Back in ninth grade, my old D&D group had decided one by one that they were too cool for D&D. As the DM and the last one standing, I was really desperate for a campaign. The local library hosted one, so I signed up despite not knowing anybody present. The guy who organizes it tells me I'm their sixth person, and they're glad to have another player character. He asked me to meet up in a couple days before to make a character, since I was not familiar with the then new 4th edition. After a short rules summary, the conversation goes something like this. Me. I really like fast characters, so maybe a monk or a rogue. We don't have books with monks, but a rogue would be perfect for party balance. Oh, sweet. What is everyone else playing? We have a paladin, a wizard, and 3 DMs. 3 and 3 is a nice mix. I dropped before this first session. I feel like I probably dodged a bullet, but maybe they're having a great time with their triple DM and 2 player characters. To each their own. I have spent the better part of an hour casually thinking about how the hell 3 DMs at once would work. Very quick, minor horror story that occurred quite recently. I have a friend whom we'll call New DM who is, as their nickname implies, relatively new to DMing. A few months ago, they pitched an Ezeki campaign where our characters, all originally from the Forgotten Realms, find themselves in another world with different monsters and species and somewhat eerie vibes. For the most part, the players all make typical fantasy characters, except for John. John, having been explicitly warned that this is a homebrew setting that has little to do with the Forgotten Realms, creates a character whose sole purpose is, to put it bluntly, showboating knowledge of the Forgotten Realms. His character is a homebrew, Storm Genasi sorcerer from the city of Sigil, and his first actions as a character is going to the nearby inn where the confused, transported party members are gathering, tavern meetings am I right, and begin to hound the innkeeper for information about which plane they're on. The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman who runs an inn. She manages to give what information she can, but obviously being an innkeeper, she knows almost nothing about planes. John, as the sorcerer, continues to badger her for information. Is this a demiplane? Why have I never heard of it? Where are the metaphysical scholars who can talk to me about all this? All while the new DM, who is completely new to running D&D, desperately tries to get John to take the hint that the new DM doesn't know anything about this information and they're not encyclopedically knowledgeable about Forgotten Realms lore. My character, a brusque, salt-of-the-earth mercenary paladin, eventually points out the fact that John is badgering a random working-class woman for very specific planar information, and John goes on a long-winded tangent about Sigil and how you can step through a door and end up anywhere, etc., etc. Eventually, the tiefling rogue, who has been almost unable to get any words in while John talks about fighting in the Blood War, asks a question which leads the innkeeper to mention that a powerful sorceress lives in the castle, and brave adventurers can sometimes get an audience with her and ask for a boon. Boom. Plot point. The rest of the party decides to start working on fighting some monsters so they can hopefully attract the attention of the people who might get them back to the Forgotten Realms. John doesn't like the idea of doing random quests for, quote, nobodies, as he was considered very powerful and knowledgeable in his home realm, and he begins loudly questioning why his character would have motivation to do any of this, which, as a longtime perma-DM, is always a red flag to me. If your character has no motivation to participate in the story, why did you make that character? We fight some stuff, and combat is actually pretty fun. John and my character, the paladin, strike up a decent in-character rivalry. John as this knowledgeable scholar, and Paladin as the mercenary villager, utterly disinterested in academic pursuits. During the fight, John misses a ranged spell attack, and he tries to claim that a miss on a ranged spell means it, quote, didn't fire, and that he can roll to cast it again. New DM, being a new DM, agrees, clearly confused. I immediately step in and say, no, that's not how it works. John is clearly irritated, but claims to have just been confused. I begin to get the sense that John is trying to, quote, win at D&D, and I'm confirmed seconds later. After our fight, John continues to complain about how degrading this work is for someone like him, who used to be a person people came to for issues, which would be fine except that he will not stop talking about it. I'm a little tired from assisting new DM and one of the other players who is also a beginner. So I just described Paladin using Lay on Hands to heal John a bit after the fight and then chill for a little. After a bit, the Bard player, who is a brand new player mentioned from earlier, gets into a bit of an argument with John. Being a gnome, Bard jokes that she's going to tuck and roll Sonic the Hedgehog style in front of John and try to trip him. She rolls acrobatics. John furiously insists that he should be able to see her doing this and avoid it, claiming that his passive perception alone, a painful average of 10, should be enough to avoid this. New DM asks him to make a dex save. He again reiterates that his passive perception should allow him to see her attempt and shove her out of the way. Bard tentatively suggests that he get advantage on the dex save. John loudly proclaims that he won't let his character be humiliated and hurt like this by tripping with a paladin who can heal people right next to him, and sulks for a bit while we awkwardly retcon Bard and Paladin's interaction. We then move on. We eventually do a quest at a supposedly haunted house, though Paladin uses Divine Sense in a few places and finds no undead. He does, however, get a nat 20 on an investigation, which notices a footprint leading to a half-hidden stairway where he hears 3 faint voices faintly on the second floor. John badgers the DM to let him use his passive perception, again a 10, to also hear this, even though finding/hearing the voices required Paladin to get a natural 20. New DM gives a firm no to John. However, Paladin quickly gathers the group to tell them he heard 3 faint voices and that he's going to fly up to the window, he's an ASMR, and peek in. Bard, quite prudently for a new player, points out that the house is quite dark, and that her dark vision might help to see inside the window. Paladin leaves the house, lifting Bard above his head to peek above the windowsill. On a good check, Bard sees 3 men who look like criminals, muttering that they've heard people rooting around the house and they ought to get out of here. Here's where events get confusing. Paladin and Bard establish that Paladin lowers them to the ground, talks to Bard about what she saw, and the 2 of them head back inside to tell the others. John, partially speaking over Bard and Paladin, says that he uses a racial ability he can use once per long rest to teleport into the middle of the 3 guys meeting in the room with a loud thunderclap. He claims this will give us a surprise round. The only issue is, the rest of the characters are all still at the bottom of a 50-foot staircase, and John would be the only person who could actually take a proper action during the surprise round. Upon being asked why he's doing this, John insists that it's cool character flavor. He angrily tells new DM that they don't know how surprise works, even though I cut in that they do, and John kind of just doesn't get to make a call on this. I suggest that if John talked to the rest of the group about a plan, they can all sneak up the staircase and kick the door down after he teleports, creating a surprise round that we can all participate in. John doesn't like this? John asks why Paladin and Bard just can't immediately charge in after him. We are both confused. But you guys are both at the window, right? He asks. We both stare blankly. We fully described our characters walking in and telling everyone what we had seen. He both hadn't been listening and had also been actively metagaming. Guess what? If our characters hadn't walked in, he would not have known the guys up there were regular criminals we could take on easily, which was the whole purpose of peeking into the windows, or that they were planning to run, which was his main reason for trying to surprise them. Eventually, new DM, somewhat upset, asks for John to stop arguing with everybody. John continues to argue. New DM ends the session, and we quietly trickle out. John apologizes to new DM, but is later removed from the game due to lack of compatibility. Despite the shenanigans, I'm looking forward to session 2. The rest of the party is great so far. Alright, well, this is definitely something: a spotlight hog, and a know-it-all, and a metagamer, and a bit of a dick. Kinda goes in hand, but you know what? It is definitely something that you need to deal with in your game eventually. If you allow a person like this to continue playing and acting as they do, it's going to ruin the experience for the rest of the party. It is inevitable. And I'm glad that the DEM did not allow this to continue. Yeah, the guy apologized in the end, but a fake apology is only going to go so far, and this behavior is not something that can be fixed easily. People need to commit to actually trying to play with a group and be compatible with everyone else. It takes more than just, "I'm sorry, I guess." Look, I'm a guy who absolutely loves lore in video games and in Dungeons and Dragons, but if I'm a player, I can't use my lore knowledge to try to one-up the DM. That is a massive dick move. It is not cool to try to one-up the guy who's running this universe, especially if the universe doesn't apply to the lore that I know. I know it's exciting to figure things out, but remember, you only know what your character knows. And with that, we're going to end today's episode. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more content from me, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.